It started with a fence, just 6 feet of perfectly legal lumber, but in a neighborhood ruled by one woman's ego. Even following the rules can make you a target. What she didn't know. The man she tried to intimidate was a zoning inspector, and he was about to turn her own rulebook into her downfall. My name is Eli Barrett. After 2 decades working as a regional zoning inspector across Colorado, I finally did what I'd been putting off for years. I bought a house. A modest fixer-upper just outside Boulder, tucked into a quiet cul-de-sac with enough land to build a garden, park my truck, and enjoy some well-earned peace. Peace, as I quickly learned, is fragile. 3 months after moving in, I finished installing a 6-foot, industrial-grade cedar fence around the perimeter. I built it myself, down to the last nail. The height, materials, and setback distance were precisely within municipal code. I'd even double-checked my HOA's covenants, submitted the paperwork, and got written approval from the design review committee. Everything was above board. And then came Marcia. She lived directly across the street, a woman in her late 50s, always wearing oversized sunglasses and a suspiciously crisp visor. She wasn't just a board member on the HOA, she was the board, president, treasurer, and self-appointed enforcer. Every rule, real or invented, ran through her. One morning, I stepped outside to find a yellow notice taped to my new fence. Notice of violation. Your fence does not align with the visual character of the neighborhood. The complaint was vague, unsigned, but printed on HOA letterhead. A second page followed with a $1, $500 fine, and a 30-day removal deadline. I stared at the paper for a long time, then laughed, not because it was funny, but because I couldn't believe the audacity. You see, I'm not just a homeowner. I'm the guy who wrote half the zoning codes she was misquoting. At first, I considered ignoring it. But something about Marcia's smug persistence got under my skin. This wasn't about offense. This was about power. Control. She wanted to make an example out of me. She thought I'd fold like everyone else. She had no idea who she was dealing with. I started with a records request. I pulled her property filings, building permits, and HOA meeting minutes. And there it was, her own 8-foot PVC fence, installed 7 years ago, with no permit, no approval, and in direct violation of setback rules. Strike one. Next. I knocked on a few doors. Nothing aggressive, just neighborly chats. What I found was a pattern. Marcia had fined a young couple $300 because their flower pots clashed with the porch paint. Another neighbor said her daughter was scolded for drawing chalk animals on the sidewalk. And Harold, a retired teacher with a bad back, was fined for noise pollution because of his wind chimes. They all hated her, but none of them had fought back. Until now, at the next HOA meeting, I showed up in jeans and a flannel, blending in with the crowd. Marcia stood at the podium, reading my supposed violation like it was a court indictment. She spoke in clipped, rehearsed sentences. When she finished, I asked a simple question. Can you cite the specific clause I've violated? She paused, blinked, then reached for a binder, flipped pages, stammered something about community harmony. There was no clause, no language, nothing enforceable. I thanked her and submitted a formal appeal, but I wasn't done. The next morning, I filed a zoning complaint anonymously on her illegal fence. I attached documentation, photos, and timestamps, but I went further. I submitted a full report on misuse of authority, unauthorized fines, and financial reimbursements from the HOA ledger that didn't line up with any board votes. A week later, a city compliance officer arrived at Marcia's door with a $10,000 citation and a removal order for her own fence. The same woman who fined me for code violations had broken more than half the rules in the book. Her screams echoed across the street. But this wasn't about revenge. Not really. It was about setting things right. I spent the next month helping my neighbors file appeals, gather evidence, and audit past fines. One woman had been forced to remove a herb garden she used to cook for her kids. Another man had been threatened with eviction over his American flag being too large. Though, the final blow came when I uncovered records showing that Marcia had hired a landscaping company, her cousins, and awarded them contracts without any competitive bids. There were kickbacks, fake invoices, even payments made from HOA reserves for holiday lighting consultations. At the next meeting, I brought a 40-page report. This time, I didn't come quietly. I stood up and read statements from my neighbors. Then I laid out the findings. As I spoke, something incredible happened. People who had never said a word at meetings began to speak up. You fined me for Halloween decorations while your house looked like a Vegas casino. You said my daughter's sidewalk art lowered property value. You fined my husband for parking in front of our own house during chemo. One by one, the room turned. Marcia tried to shout over them. She called it a smear campaign, said we were liars. But the board had heard enough. A vote was called. She was stripped of her title that night. 2 weeks later, she resigned. But the story doesn't end there. The new board approached me, hesitant but hopeful. There were no digital records, no budget logs, just folders full of handwritten fines and policies she invented on the fly. They asked me to help clean it up. I agreed. Over the next 3 months, we rebuilt the system from scratch. Transparent accounting, open meetings, no fines without review. We launched a small grant program for community gardens, fence repairs, even porch swings. Neighbors started talking again, sharing tools, hosting barbecues. It felt like a neighborhood again, not a battlefield. As for Marcia, her house sat quiet for weeks. No open house, no goodbye, just a faded for sale sign, leaning crooked in the lawn. Then, one morning, I found a wooden sign nailed gently into my fence. Hand-painted, no name, just 5 words, Certified Aesthetic Legend 2024. I left it there, because in the end, it was never about the fence. It was about drawing a line, not between yards, but between fear and courage, between silence and truth. So now, when people ask about the sign, or the fence, or the meeting that changed it all, I pour them a drink and say, let me tell you how a $1, $500 fine brought down an entire HOA empire. And they always listen, because some battles start small, but end up shaking the whole damn block.